whatever they want and being okay with it. I'm saying that there's boundaries. Like, if somebody, like, I open my life now and it's like everybody can come in and it's like, and I'm not gonna leave you. It's like, I'm gonna be there all the way through. But if you keep lying, say so, or just say somebody keeps stealing from me, well, the boundaries are gonna go out a little bit. It's gonna be like, you're not allowed in my house if you keep stealing from my house. That doesn't change the position that you have in my heart. I still love you. I'll still be there in your life. I'll still give you another chance. It's like, as long as you keep on, you make the correction, there's always room for forgiving. But as long as you're continuing to do that, there's a line drawn and says like, no, you can't do that. God doesn't even let us do that. It says if we keep on living our lives the way we want to live it, without Him, heart in our heart, He actually takes His home outside of us. He goes back outside and starts knocking. God isn't okay with a hardened heart. I was like, He's not. And so it's like for us to just tell people, it's like, oh yeah, it's like, or I went to that seminar that pastor sent us to, where the people, women who were being really physically abused and sexually abused, we're told, it's like, well, if you just made changes, if you were more submissive, then your husband would stop doing that. It's like, and that was by the people in the church, right? Telling their pastors were telling them that they were the problems. And so they go back, and they keep on getting beaten. I don't think that's something that God wants. But I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about areas where it's like, oh, because in our marriage, Elton wouldn't help me with the babies. It's like, he wouldn't help me clean up in the house. It's like, here we had like 7 children, and he wouldn't do anything. It's like he would go in his room and play video games all day and be on his phone or whatever. It's like, but he wasn't really connected to any of us, and it felt like I was just a trophy on this shelf. It was like he disconnected himself from us completely. Like he had so much abuse that he wouldn't even sing happy birthday. He had so much abuse in his life, and when it came to holidays, because there was so much violence, where there were stabbings in their home constantly on holidays, they were fighting, they were always trying to diffuse fights. He didn't like any holidays. When we go to our holiday parties with our family, he would go off into a corner and he'd sleep the whole time. When I was giving birth, he'd go off in a corner and he'd sleep. And he would only wake up when it's time to push. It's like, and when I was healing, it's like he wouldn't get up to make me water or anything. In fact, I remember asking him, it's like, hey, like, can you make me water? He says, what do you think the nurses are here for? So he brought all of that into our marriage, and yeah, it's like, wasn't pleasant. It's like, now we know why. Now we understand, it's like what was going on with him. I now understand why he would ignore my birthday for 7 years straight. I never could figure out why. Like he just didn't seem to care about, like when we sing happy birthday, like to the kids, he'd go off and work on a car and go in his room and go to sleep. He would never sing happy birthday to his kids. And I'm just thinking, what's wrong with you? So a lot of my anger, there were some reasons, but there were other reasons. It was just me. But it was just when we began to realize this whole thing, that if we will just be the person that lets God write His image over us again, get into those deep places in our life, one by one. Having the other person be in a safe place for you is awesome, but that's not even necessary. Because God is a safe place for you. If you had just you and God, and you can do it. You can be healed completely. Because He didn't change when God started putting me back together. He hadn't changed. He was still doing the same things. He didn't start helping me as a husband and a father until Harmony was born. And that was because I was ready to leave. I was like, okay, that's enough already. It's like, that is enough. I remember he was so abusive to the kids, I finally said to him, when I finally realized that I was responsible as a mom to protect my children, that I was letting this go on, and it was like, and if CPS had gotten involved, I would have been responsible too. They would have said, like if somebody committed murder and you were there, you're responsible. Well, me as a mom, being there watching my kids get abused, I was responsible. And so I realized that, and I finally made the step, and I felt like God had said, Abby, it's time to leave now. And I had perfect peace. I wasn't doing it in anger. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I looked at him and I said, Elton, I'm leaving. I'm not divorcing you, but I'm not staying. You need help. And every time I talk to him about God, he gets super angry. Like he didn't want to hear anything about God. He's like, who do you think you are, holier than thou, blah, 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 right? He just blasts me every time. He hated when I talked about God. So I had to find other friends. Like Stacy was a major blessing in my life because she loved talking about God, which I love talking about God. And so we talk all night long because it was like I could never talk to him about God. And so that was a big deal. It's like, you know, it's like so it wasn't until way later when I finally said that he realized I need help. And that's when we started to see Dr. Rose, and God started to get into those areas of his heart. And over these years, we're seeing more and more heart healing. We're seeing more of those memories coming up. Little by little, they're coming up, and each one is getting healed. So the more we're going through these difficult things in our life, and there are plenty of difficult things we've gone through, the more the two of us are starting to get one closer to God. And then we're starting to feel closer to each other. To me, this is the motto of life. You can do this with the children, you can do this with, but you gotta take your eyes off of you. And if your spouse or the other person never, ever changes, ever, they go to hell, you know, it's like they live their life and they wanna live that way and they wanna be miserable and they're always angry and they're always lashing out. I will say that I experienced what it was like to have God as a husband, where I felt like Elton wasn't there and he didn't care, and I felt so alone. There were times I just felt so alone and I'd cry. It's like, because I was like, I don't have a husband. And I said, you know, God says, why don't you ask me to hold you? And I said, you know, will you hold me? And I literally felt his arms wrapped around me. He was so special. I remember one time I was complaining to God. I said, he never helps around the house. He won't wash dishes. He won't help cook. He won't help clean. It's like everything he leaves to me. And he says, I didn't ask you to do anything. I said, well, you're telling me by not doing anything, because who else is going to do it? You know, there's some kind of fairy or what? You know, it's like you're telling me by what you're not doing. He never ordered me to clean, but he spoke, you know, very clearly in his actions. And so I said, like God said to me one day, and I was complaining, and I was just, because I'm learning, you know, it's like, take my eyes off of Elton and just like forgive, just constantly, God was telling me forgive, constantly forgive, love him, you know, be gentle, speak to him gently, you know, it's like, and he was just teaching me how to be a wife to him that was supportive and praising and things like that. And so God said, why don't you ask me to help clean? I was like, yeah, right. You know, it's like, what are you gonna do? I remember saying this, I was in my living room, I said, what are you gonna do? It's like, you can help me like wash dishes. And he said, why don't you ask me? And I says, okay, God, why don't you help me wash dishes? Can you help me wash dishes? And I honestly said it sarcastically, because I thought it was the stupidest thing. And then it's like, all of a sudden, I had this strong desire, like this really joyful feeling to go and wash dishes. And as I was washing dishes, he was standing there talking to me the whole time. And we were laughing and cracking jokes, and it's like the time flew by so fast, and I realized when you're doing it together, it's so much easier. And so it's like, you know, it's like I started learning, you know, it's like that I could depend on God. And as time went on, it's like God began to heal him and started putting him back together where he was more supportive. And we went through some difficult things, but I had a hard time when God said, okay, Abby, now your husband is helping you around the house, you know, more. He's helping you more in these certain areas. He's trying to spend more time with you. He's like, you don't need me to hold you. You have a husband that can hold you now. You know, it's like, and I didn't want him. I remember thinking, I don't need him anymore. I don't even need a husband. I have you, God. But God wouldn't be those things anymore that he would be. He said, I'll be the things that he cannot be yet as I mold and shape him. But he said, but the things that he can be, I'm no longer going to be. It's like, so I had to learn to adjust and let go. But those were the journeys I had. I'm telling you that even if your spouse never changed, God can be your best friend. He can speak to you, and he can be the spouse that is understanding. He can be your comforter. He can be your greatest cheerleader, whatever it is you think you need from your spouse. Honestly, even down to the sexual desires. I can tell you that when I was on my knees, spending time with God, and it's like, you really, like, even if they don't spend time with you, even if, you know, it's like a week passes and it's like they don't even see you, and you spend time with God, it's like ecstasy. It's like his presence comes on you, and it's just like everything shouts, hallelujah. It's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I tell people, and it sounds gross, but it was like an orgasm times 100. You know, it was like, you know, it was just like the best experience ever. You didn't need a man for anything in your life. It's like you had a God that filled you and satisfied, and then you walk around and you're smiling all the time. Nothing can bring you down. It's like your house is a mess. It's like, it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. Your children are like all complaining. It's like, you look wonderful. You know, it's like, and it's like, that's walking on cloud nine. You know, it's like when you've got His presence. But don't give up. Even if your spouse isn't changing, you keep praying for your spouse. You keep loving them the way God loves them. You let God be their teacher. God has a way of getting through to the toughest of hearts when we get out of the way. And I will say that God has been really good. All things are possible with God. God can bring a relationship back together, but I want to just emphasize this. Like I said, it doesn't, sometimes because people have choice, it's not like every spouse is going to decide, I'm going to do what is right. There was one relationship where the wife wanted to obey God, tried to submit to God, wanted to do what is right, but the husband refused, wanted to continue an affair. There was nothing she could do. But she had a choice. She could stay connected to God herself. And she would be lacking no good thing. She'd be lacking nothing. She'd be totally healed. She'd be totally full of joy. She'd be totally filled. Your source is in Jesus. That's why I love the songs that they chose today. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above Him there's no other. Jesus is the way, right? And then, you know, it's like, it says, life everlasting, strength for today, a taste the living water, and never thirst again. He tells the woman at the well, right? If you drink the water that I have, you'll never thirst. Like if you eat from Him, it's like you'll never hunger. You'll be satisfied. In all things, Paul says, I've learned to be content. I've learned to be satisfied. Things didn't change in his circumstances. He's getting beaten. He didn't always have food. He didn't always have a roof over his head. If you think your circumstances are what brings you joy, then you're missing the point. You got your eyes on the wrong place. Jesus is the one who satisfies. But the truth is, if you want to have a really successful relationship, not just a marriage, but relationship with your children, with your, like school friends, your co-workers, then the best ideal is that both of you would let God mold and shape you. I don't believe in soulmates, honestly. I believe you can take two people from any walk of life. One can be a hooker even, one can be a murderer, whatever, it's like they can be from any place. If they would have let God begin to write His image over those places that were written over them, that were cut, and they were to let God get into those deep places, and they would all of a sudden begin to mold and shape themselves, like let God do the cutting again, remolding again, right? The sanding again, to where you fit so perfectly connected to God. Because when you get like this, you are so loving. You are so kind. Who couldn't love somebody that's loving and kind? Your image would change. You wouldn't be that person that you were before. You'd fit perfectly. Always. You'd always fit perfectly. You would be, and the more you do that, right, I said, you're going to feel closer to each other. You're going to already be connected to God, that even if your spouse passes away, you're still connected. You're still safe. You're still okay. You're so molded and shaped into the image of God. Is that you're just one with Him, so you'll be fine because you're one with the Almighty. So here's the motto of success: letting God shape and mold you so that you fit so perfectly together, and making sure God is in the center of it. And like I said, even if the other one doesn't, you make God the center of your life. You don't worry about what God isn't doing in that other person, because He's trying. You don't worry about what their response is. You worry about what your response is, because that's what's going to make the difference for you. They'll still be miserable, unfortunately, but you'll be okay. Is that it? Okay, that's it.